A lot of times people see Character Animator and say, oh, this looks great, but I can't draw, or it takes too long to rig a puppet, or whatever their excuse is. Well, that is not a valid excuse anymore with the introduction of Characterizer, a new feature we've added in Adobe Character Animator CC 2019. Basically, what this does is take a capture of your face and then apply a style over top of it, whether that's a painting or a statue or a hand sketch drawing like this, and turns yourself into an animated character in just a matter of minutes. So in this video, we'll start with the capture process, how to set everything up and make sure all your settings are optimized for the best results. We'll dig into the edit mode where you can adjust all the different parameters to get your style looking exactly like you want, how to bring that into Character Animator, and then finally, how to add your own unique custom styles to apply to your captures as well. So Characterizer is in the Start workspace up here. All you have to do is click Open Characterizer. So if this is your first time using Characterizer, you're not going to see a bunch of faces. I've used it a couple times for myself and my 7-year-old son Cameron, so they're showing up here as disembodied heads. If I wanted to go back into a capture I've already done, I would just select it, click it, and it would open up. I can also delete any existing captures by hovering over them and clicking the delete icon. But for now, I would want to go through the create new capture process. Now, 99% of the time, this is probably what you want to do, is just click this create new capture button. However, down here in more options, if you click on this, you have 2 additional options of ways to capture. So the first is select an image. This is going to allow you to take one static image and stylize it based off of that. You're not going to get the full fidelity that you would with all the different mouth shapes and expressions that you're doing with the full capture process, but this is nice if you do want to do, a one-off profile pic of your friend or something, very specific with only one face and you really don't need the lip sync. This is a nice out. The second is manual capture, and this is just a process, kind of a backup that gives you a different way to go through the capture process. We recommend try and create new capture first, but if that doesn't work, or if you're running into troubles based off your lighting or environment or whatever, manual capture may be a good way to go instead. But for the sake of this tutorial, let's go and click create new capture. So if everything's set up correctly, you should see something like this: your face, a webcam, a little overlay here, the audio meter moving up and down, and voiceover that's giving you some instructions. If you don't see your face here, you can go to the camera icon down here and just pick whichever camera, webcam you want to use. For best results, you want to make sure your face is as close to the camera as possible, filling in this circle. You're kind of centered, so your nose isn't over here or anything like that. You're kind of centered and as symmetrical as you can be. And you're well lit. Your face is well lit and you're not having a very cluttered background. So I took down some posters and stuff like that in the background that I thought might get in the way, because basically what's going to happen is it's going to extract your face and head, and if there's a lot of clutter, it might think those pieces are part of your head. So if you're wearing headphones or you have a colorful poster in the background, that sort of stuff, try to give yourself as neutral of a background as possible. Light your face, get close to the camera, and when you're ready, click Start Capture. So let's try out this process. I'm just going to run through the steps and you'll see it's a pretty quick process.
Look at the camera lens and make a neutral expression in 3, 2, 1. Close your eyes in 3, 2, 1. Open your eyes and smile in 3, 2, 1. Frown in 3, 2, 1. Make a surprised expression in 3, 2, 1. Repeat after me. Adobe.
Adobe.
Photoshop.
Photoshop.
Lightroom.
Lightroom.
Woo-hoo!
Woo-hoo! All right, so that gives me this nice little grid of all my different faces. So these first 5 here, these were, the directed ones: neutral, close, smile, frown, surprised. And then all these visime shapes, all these different mouth shapes were taken automatically when I said those words: Adobe, Photoshop, Lightroom, woohoo. And you noticed I was being very particular about the way I pronounced these. I didn't say it really quickly. Adobe, Photoshop, like that. I was very Adobe, Photoshop. I feel like you get the best results when you are very deliberate in your pronunciation pronunciations and try to exaggerate those mouth shapes, be really open and closed, and just, really focus on trying to pronounce every single syllable and sound of those individual words. So when you're done with that, click continue, and that's going to take you to a little finish screen and then load up the settings. All right, so that turned out to be a pretty good capture, I think. I can look through my different faces and captures by clicking the little arrow icons to the left or right of this face and seeing how they all turned out and making sure everything looks like it, got masked out and the features seem clear and all of that stuff. So right now we're in edit mode, and honestly I feel like this is the heart of the feature. This is where you spend the most time just playing around and tweaking things and adjusting and trying to get a style that works for you. So Character Animator comes with a bunch of pre-packaged styles. These have all been licensed from the original artist, and if you roll over any of these, you'll see the name and the artist and the year that they were made. But you are free to use these for your styles as much as you want. But you also have the option to add a new style and take any image and use that as a style. We'll get to that in a little later, but let's start with just one of the prepackaged styles, this guy Ken by Adrian Morgan. All I do is click the thumbnail and it immediately renders out a version of that over here, and I can see I've started to get some of the oil painting textures of this particular character. But it doesn't stop there. You have a lot of flexibility over how this is stylized, and the place I always start up here is the stylization slider. This is going to determine how much of the stylization is applied to your face. So if I want a lot of stylization, if I want a lot of the features and details from that style, I'll just turn the stylization slider all the way up to 100, and that's going to add, the bags under my eyes, a lot more shading and shadows and wrinkles and all that stuff, all those details and features from that original image. But if I wanted to look a little bit more like my face, I can drag this all the way to the left to 0, and that's going to do a really minimal application of the style and look a little bit more like my face. And I can try the different faces by clicking the left or right arrows. It'll take a second to render and then apply the style to those faces as well. So you can do, 2 or 3 of these, see how they look, and then, go back and they're rendered, and so they behave pretty quickly. So at 50%, which is the default, you're kind of getting half and half. You're getting half of your capture, half of the stylization applied, and you can tweak this as much or as little as you want towards one way or the other to get the desired look that you're going for. The next slider down here, feature exaggeration. I'll use this if I kind of want to anonymize myself a little bit. So if I don't want this to look like my face, instead I want to make a different type of character, I can try adjusting this slider a little bit more and seeing what different, features I can kind of warp and pronounce a little bit more or less to get a slightly different looking character. If you go really far extreme, you're going to get some really weird looking characters. So, and maybe that's what you want for a particular character. That's fine. Those are some options you have. One thing to note, when you roll over this, you'll see it says characterized facial features not available when head turns is checked. We'll get to that in a second, but if you're going to use the head turn checkbox, feature exaggeration is not going to work in this version. Next up is cycles, and if you have used Character Animator in the past, you know about cycle layers, where basically you are doing a frame-by-frame version of a ping sequence or multiple layers in a group or something like that. This is the same idea where you can select how many randomly synthesized frames you want. So let's just pick something like 4, and it's going to go through this render process where it's looking around at all the individual pixels and just shifting them ever so slightly. And what this does is give it kind of a live illustrated or live drawn effect. And I think it's a really nice look. It helps it feel a little bit more hand drawn and handcrafted and add a little bit of extra life and dynamics to the character. So, honestly, the majority of the time I am turning cycles on for my puppets. And sometimes I'll do just 2 or 3 just to give it a little life. When you get up to 6, you do start to get to potential performance issues when you have a lot of characters, because basically what it's doing is adding multiple versions for each eye, each mouth shape, each head, all of that stuff, and so it tends to be a very heavy file that comes out of it. So just be forewarned, if you've got the computer and it can handle it, great. Otherwise, you might want to keep your cycles on the lower side or not have any at all. These next two, resolution and quality, go hand in hand. These are various options that you can do to change, the sizing and the quality of what you're seeing here. if you select higher values, things are probably going to move a little bit slower. It's going to take a little bit of extra processing time to put these things together, but you're going to get a slightly different stylized image. So you'll see the image rendering here. This is what it currently looked like. And as the resolution gets added in, you'll see there's a lot more fidelity, and I can see these little scratch marks and the brush strokes and the eyes and all of that. So it's worth it to play around with these and see what works best for your system, as well as the specific style that you're going for. Head only, this, if you check this, it's just going to take the body and the background out of the equation and just show you a disembodied head. So if you wanted to place this over top of something else in a rig or something like that, that's an option to have, but by default that is off. And the last thing is head turns. If you check this, when your puppet is rendered, it will also render quarter views of the head on the left and the right to give your character a little bit of extra dimension. I usually check this because I think it adds a nice little effect. When you turn your head, your character will automatically turn your head, and it just automatically does it. You don't have to do this in the capture process. It's going to automatically move your features to look like it's slightly turning. But again, you cannot preview that in here. You're only going to see that when you click Generate Puppet, which we'll get to in a second, but it's a nice feature to have. So we've kind of gone through all the steps for this one style, but honestly, a lot of the time I'm just playing around with different styles. I'll select them, try them out, see how they look, and depending on the look that I'm going for, I can get a wide variety of results from just one face. So, if I want to make a statue version of myself, for example, I can do something like that. Or if I'm going for more of a, sketch look, even a really simple, this is a cocktail napkin sketch that was probably done in just, a couple of seconds, but it actually makes for a pretty nice style. So yeah, click on a bunch of these different things, see what looks good to you, try yourself as a colored pencil sketch or a charcoal sketch or, an oil painting or whatever. And it's really fun to just play around with all these settings and get very different effects. All right, so if you're happy with how things are looking and want to bring this into Character Animator, you would just go up here to Generate Puppet and click that. If you just want a frame of your character, just a single static image, you can right click here and you can do Export Frame, and that's just going to save an individual PNG file of this face. But most of the time you're probably just going to want Generate Puppet, so I'll click that, and now it's going to go through the rendering process. If you have cycles applied or head turns, this is going to take a little longer. It can take a few minutes with all that stuff on, but I've done a pretty simple face here, so it should be a pretty quick process. So there we go. That is going to immediately open it up in a new Character Animator scene, and you will see your character move around and talk with you for the first time. Now, as usual in Character Animator, you have full control over how strong or weak these different parts are. So if I don't like the eyebrows moving that much, I can go into face here, twirl that open, and let's try eyebrow strength and bring that down a little bit. And then when I move my eyebrows, it's going to be a much more subtle effect instead. Same thing with eye gaze. If you see your pupils are moving, too far to the side, one way or the other, I would change camera strength down instead of 100% to something a little bit lower, and then they won't move as much with your own eye movements. So with the picture frame version of this, I basically just added, this frame layer over top of my character in my scene, and then made it look like, I'm a talking painting. This character also has the head turns, which I did not check off in the other one, but you'll notice as I turn my head, the character is turning his head as well. Now, this has also generated a PSD file of this character. So if I look, this was Characterizer 2, so let's find that character over here. If I double click it, it'll open up in rig mode, and I can see exactly how everything was tagged and set up. You can see when it really dig into it, it gets pretty complicated where we added all these sticks and fixed handles and things like that. But if you wanted to open up the Photoshop file, you can just click this and go to Edit Original, and that's going to open up the original file in Photoshop. And if you really dig in here, you can see behind the scenes how some of this stuff was made. So you can see if I turn off this neutral mouth right here in the mouth group, I can see my eyes, my eyeballs showing up there in the background. And then I can go between my different faces. So you can see every mouth shape is actually a full face. And so the whole face changes as I talk, which is a pretty nice effect because it gives me all these, wrinkles and movements in the jaw and the cheeks and the eyes. And and that's kind of how everything works together. So the nice thing is I've got the full, power of Photoshop to adjust some of these. If I don't like the coloring, or I feel like, the mouth, I'm gonna darken that a little bit or something like that, I can go in and select each of these, individual parts and make the various adjustments that I want to each face. So if you have, certain perfectionist tendencies like I do, you're probably gonna wanna open the Photoshop file and play around with some stuff inside here. So jumping back to Characterizer, you will probably reach a point where you want to add your own styles as well. So I'm gonna go to Create New Style, and I just made this image of this, little digital painting that I did using some Photoshop brushes, a pretty simple, quick, color study and sketch that I did. So I'm just gonna select that and open it. You'll see enable all formats. We've got PNG and JPEG down here. So I'm gonna click open, and that's gonna take me through a two-step process to set this face up. So I have my tools down here. The selection tool allows me to take any red dot and move it around. I can also drag over a bunch of dots at the same time. And if I select a dot when all of those are selected, I will drag them all at the same time. And then I have zoom, which will allow me to zoom in, and the hand icon will allow me to pan around. So normally I want to zoom in a little bit closer to get really fine detail onto these different parts. So for the eyebrows, for example, I'm going to select one of these, and you see I get this nice little guide here that's kind of teaching me where my part should go. So it's saying for the eyebrows, I should put the lines over top of the eyebrows and kind of equally distribute the red dots. So I'm going to try something like that. Let's move these over, and I'll do the same for the other eyebrow as well. It looks pretty good. For the pupils, I've got a couple of controls. If I click this dot in the center, it's going to allow me to move the whole circle around. And if I click this little circle on the edge, that's going to allow me to resize and rescale the pupil. So I want to make sure that's kind of the full, covers the entire part of the pupil. This job, automatically when you bring something in, Character Animator is going to try to do its best to connect with things, but it's not always going to line up correctly. And so you're probably going to have to dig in there and do a little bit of adjusting around these different sections. But basically all you have to do is use these images over here as a guide of how to set things up, and just, adjust the outlines to match your style. And you know what? Every once in a while you're gonna run into weird things. Like this artwork, for example, his nose is a triangle. It doesn't really fit, this nostril below the nostrils thing. But what I can do is, in this case, I would probably just, make the bridge of the nose follow this line here. That's kind of the important part. And then I'm gonna kind of shorten these other features over here. So play around with these. I mean, you can get really dramatic, different effects from where you place these dots. So you can always jump back into this mode, even if you've already set it. So you can go back and adjust very easily. So try some stuff out, see what happens, and then come back if it's not working correctly. With the mouth, I'm kind of just making sure the middle is showing here, and then I've got a little bit of the outside area for where the the lips would be. Basically, as you're seeing in the image over here, you just want you want to make sure that the teeth or anything inside the mouth is kind of between these two green lip areas. If I hold down the spacebar key, I can pan automatically, and I can just drag to really easily do that and just adjust some of these outline parts to make sure they're matching the contours of the face. But notice how I'm not including the ears. I'm kind of just going with the contours of how the edges of the face here. And overall, I think that's mapping pretty well to the facial features of my character. So I'm going to go and click the next button. Now this next step is determining where your different regions are, and basically you're just going to paint over the different sections of your character. So by default, face is selected, and you see this little guide layer here of this guy, and as I move through, you can see it's selecting the different colors and different portions of this guy's face. So with the face brush, I can just kind of click on here and drag and over any area that is skin. So I'm looking for any area of the facial area that's skin. Now I noticed there's some hair here that didn't get added in, so I'm going to select the hairbrush now, and just started painting green over top of that. If I need to adjust the brush size, I can go over here and make it, a little bit bigger or smaller. And I can also use the mouse wheel if I've got that hooked up to do the exact same thing. So you'll notice by hair, we're really talking about the hair on the top of the head. We're not talking about facial hair like this guy has. That would be included in the face. So just, small distinction, but an important one. And I have a nice little preview of how things are being masked out over here so I can make sure everything is looking correctly. And, if I had too much background over here, that's going to show up, and I can just select background and paint over to get rid of that. So you can see the background kind of being isolated here, go back to the face, go back to the hair, and just make sure all these sections look like you would want them to. The neck, by default, nothing was painted in, so I'm gonna have to do that painting myself. But basically anywhere you see skin here, so even if it's like a low cut shirt, or you see a little bit more, of under the collar and that sort of thing, anywhere where there's skin, that's where you should do the neck. That's where that mask should happen. And if I want to refine this a little bit, I can go back to the face tool and just kind of, go over some of those parts to make sure it looks all right. And the final one is clothing. And this is just going to map to your own clothing, your own, body area. So I'm just going to go over that. So that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to go through all these and make sure all my masks are looking okay. Again, this is not set in stone. If for some reason something isn't working out, you can always come back to this step later on. But I like how this is looking. So let's go to done. And so yeah, there you go. Now this style is going to show up in my list, and it will be immediately applied to whatever face I have loaded up. So that's looking good, but if I did want to go back and adjust, I just hover over, click the pencil icon, and I'll go back into those edit style steps. Now I want to note a couple of things when you're picking your own styles. Number one, you really want to look for head-on portraits. Those are going to work best. If you have a side profile view or someone looking up or down too much, that's not going to translate as well. So in general, you want your original source to be facing straight on, and you want the portrait to be straight on. Secondly, I would say the best styles, the ones that seem to work the best, are the ones that have very distinct textures or brush strokes or details to them. So things like an oil painting or this crosshatched style, from currency or statues or things like that. This is not going to work as well if you bring in, a cartoon character like Bart Simpson or Rick and Morty or something like that. The lines just aren't going to line up and have those distinct cartoon features that you might expect. So my advice would be find things with very distinctive styles, brush strokes from a painting or a stone texture from a statue or something like that, rather than very distinct features like big cartoon eyes or a very distinctive stroke around the character's face. These type of things, like we're seeing here in the default examples, those are the styles that are going to work the best. And what you're seeing here for the eyes is kind of an approximation of what you'll see, but you'll notice the original source image I had for this character, he had blue eyes. And we do a few things behind the scenes to kind of speed things up in this preview process, but for the exact look of the eyes, you're gonna wanna go to the generate puppet, and then you'll see the final version of the eyes show up. So notice these ones are much more blue and in line with that original style that I had. So, you might see a difference there, and for best results, we're doing things for speed and performance in Characterizer itself, but to see the final output, you'll want to generate Puppet and make sure that everything is looking as you want. So that is Characterizer. Within a matter of minutes, you are able to take your face, take a style that either is prepackaged or made on your own, and generate an animated custom puppet like this. So if you wanted to recreate Aha's Take On Me video, this is the way to do it. I don't know why you would. It's a classic. It shouldn't be touched, but in case you want to, it's here. So we'd love to see what you make with this. Please use #CharacterAnimator when sharing things on social media, because we would love to see all the things that you create with this. And then if you run into any issues, things aren't working out right, your captures aren't working, your styles aren't lining up correctly, the best place to get help is the official Character Animator forums. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching, and have fun.